June 3, 1955. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, Culver City, California. 10:15 in the morning. Grace Kelly walked through the marble hallways of the Thalberg building wearing a simple cotton dress the color of cream and carrying a black leather purse that cost less than the paintings hanging on the walls around her. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She was 29 years old, the biggest female movie star in America, and she was about to do something that no major Hollywood actor had ever successfully done before. She was about to quit. The office she was walking toward belonged to Louis B. Mayer, the man who had built MGM from nothing into the most powerful studio in the world. At 70 years old, Mayer controlled more than just a studio. He controlled careers, lives, destinies. He had made Greta Garbo a legend. He had transformed Joan Crawford from a dancer into an icon. He had created Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Judy Garland. Every star in Hollywood either worked for Louis B. Mayer, wanted to work for Louis B. Mayer, or had been destroyed by Louis B. Mayer for refusing to work for Louis B. Mayer. There were no other options. That was simply how Hollywood worked in 1955. Grace's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle, but her face showed nothing. She had learned to hide her emotions on film sets, to present whatever version of herself the director demanded. Today she needed that skill more than ever, because what she was about to do would either change Hollywood forever or end her career in the next 20 minutes. The studio secretary, a woman named Dorothy, who had worked for Mayer for 18 years, looked up from her typewriter with an expression that seemed almost sympathetic. "Go right in, dear. He's been waiting since 9:30. That sentence made Grace's stomach drop. Mayer was expecting her. Somehow, he knew she was coming. She pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into an office that was designed to make visitors feel small. The room was enormous, perhaps 40 feet long, with windows overlooking the studio lot where 4,000 employees worked every single day, making the films that made MGM the richest entertainment company in the world. Louis B. Mayer sat behind a desk the size of a dining room table, and he did not stand when Grace entered. He did not smile. He simply watched her with eyes that had seen every negotiating tactic, every power play, every act of rebellion that Hollywood had produced in 30 years of making movies. Grace walked across that vast expanse of carpet and placed a single piece of paper on Mayer's desk. It was her letter of resignation from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, effective immediately. She had typed it herself the night before on her personal typewriter, sitting alone in her apartment, rehearsing the words she would say when this moment came. Mayer looked at the paper but did not touch it. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and actually laughed. The sound was cold and sharp, like ice cracking. "You don't resign from MGM, Grace. Nobody resigns from me. We have a contract. For more years. You'll fulfill it like everyone else who's ever worked here." Grace remained standing. Her voice when she spoke was quiet but steady, the same voice she used on camera when playing women of dignity and strength. "I'm not asking for your permission, Louis. I'm informing you of my decision. I'm done." She watched the smile disappear from Mayer's face like water evaporating in the California sun. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mayer stood slowly, his movements deliberate, and walked to the window. From there he could see stage 15 where they were filming some romantic comedy that would make the studio another $5 million. He could see the commissary where contract players ate subsidized meals. He could see the costume department, the prop warehouse, the editing bays. His empire. "Do you know how many girls would kill to have your contract, Grace?" His voice was soft now, dangerous. "I made you. Before MGM, you were nobody. A model. A girl who did television commercials. I put you in Magambo opposite Clark Gable. I made you a star. You walk out that door and I will make sure you never work in this industry again. Not in films. Not in theater. Not even in television. I will bury you so deep that people will forget you ever existed." Grace had expected this threat. She had spent 6 months preparing for this exact conversation. But what happened next, she had not prepared for at all. Mayer turned from the window and walked back to his desk. He opened the top drawer and pulled out a manila folder. He threw it across the desk, and photographs spilled out across the polished wood. Grace's breath caught in her throat. The photo showed her at Jimmy Stewart's ranch in Beverly Hills. In one photo, she was sitting at a table with Marlon Brando, both of them laughing. In another, Bette Davis was pointing at something on a piece of paper while Jimmy Stewart looked on. In a third, Katharine Hepburn was raising a glass in what looked like a toast. "I know about your little conspiracy, Grace," Mayer said quietly. "I've known for 3 months." Grace felt her carefully constructed composure crack for just a moment. Her eyes widened as she looked at the photographs scattered across Meyer's desk like evidence at a crime scene. These weren't just casual snapshots. These were surveillance photographs, taken with a telephoto lens from a distance, showing meetings that were supposed to be completely secret. Meetings where 5 of Hollywood's biggest stars had planned what they were calling Operation Independence, the rebellion that was supposed to catch the studios completely off guard. Except Louis B. Mayer had known the entire time. "If you knew," Grace said slowly, her mind racing to understand the implications, "why didn't you stop us?" Meyer's smile returned, but this time it was cruel, the smile of a man who had won so many battles that losing wasn't even a concept he entertained anymore. "Because I wanted you to think you had a chance, Grace. I wanted you to feel hope. I wanted you to believe that you could actually beat the system. And now I'm going to show you what happens to people who try." He picked up the telephone on his desk, the same telephone he used to greenlight million-dollar productions and destroy careers with equal ease. "Get me Jack Warner, Daryl Zanuck, and Harry Cohn." Conference call. Immediately, Grace understood instantly what was happening. Mayer wasn't just going to punish her. He was coordinating with the other studio heads. Warner Brothers, where Marlon Brando was under contract. 20th Century Fox, where Bette Davis worked. Columbia Pictures, where they had leverage over other actors in the conspiracy. The studios were going to present a united front, and that front was going to crush 5 careers simultaneously. "In 10 minutes, Mayer said as he waited for the call to connect, "all 5 of you will be blacklisted industry-wide. You'll never make another film. Your careers end today. Not just yours, Grace. All of you. Marlon Brando will be working in dinner theater in Iowa. Jimmy Stewart will be selling insurance. Bette Davis will be doing radio plays for $50 a week if she's lucky. And you? You'll be Princess Grace of Monaco with nothing but a failed acting career behind you. Is that really what you want your legacy to be?" Grace walked slowly to the wall of photographs that dominated Meyer's office. 3 walls covered floor to ceiling with framed images of MGM's greatest stars. Greta Garbo, who had retired in 1941 after years of fighting for control over her own career, never making another film. Joan Crawford, who MGM had unceremoniously dropped in 1943 when they decided she was too old at 37, forcing her to rebuild her career from scratch at Warner Brothers. Jean Harlow, who had died at 26, worked literally to death by a studio that owned every hour of her time. Judy Garland, who Mayer had fed pills to keep thin and awake for 18-hour shooting days, destroying her health before she was even 30 years old. These were the careers Louis B. Mayer had controlled. These were the lives he had shaped, manipulated, and in some cases destroyed. And hanging on his wall, they looked like trophies. Grace turned back to face him, and something in her expression made Meyer's confident smile falter just slightly. "You're right, Louis," she said quietly. "This is bigger than me. That's exactly why I brought insurance." She reached into her black leather purse and pulled out a document, multiple pages stapled together, covered in signatures. She placed it on top of the resignation letter, on top of the surveillance photographs, right in the center of Meyer's enormous desk. "This is a letter signed by 47 actors, directors, and writers currently under contract to various studios. All of them threatening to strike if you blacklist any of the 5 of us, including 12 of your current contract players." Mayer grabbed the document, and his eyes scanned the names. Grace watched his face go from confident to confused to pale. The signatures were real. She had spent 3 months secretly gathering them, meeting in private homes, in parked cars, in restaurant back rooms. Robert Mitchum had signed. Gene Kelly had signed. Fred Astaire, Deborah Kerr, Sid Charisse, Donald O'Connor. Half of MGM's A-list talent had put their names on this document, pledging to walk off every production if Grace Kelly, Marlon Brando, Jimmy Stewart, Bette Davis, or Katharine Hepburn were blacklisted for quitting their contracts. Meyer's secretary buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Mayer, I have Mr. Warner and Mr. Zanuck on the line. Mr. Cohn is connecting now." Mayer pressed the speaker button with a finger that Grace noticed was trembling slightly. The voices of three of the most powerful men in Hollywood filled the office. "Lewis, this is Jack Warner. We have a problem. Marlon Brando just walked into my office and quit. Just quit. Handed me a resignation letter and walked out 5 minutes ago." Daryl Zanuck's voice came next, tight with barely controlled fury. "Bette Davis did the same thing to me. She had the nerve to smile while she was doing it. Smiled like she was enjoying watching me realize what was happening." Then a third voice, Harry Cohn from Columbia Pictures, his Brooklyn accent thick with stress. Jimmy Stewart brought his lawyer. His lawyer, Lewis. They had documents prepared. This was coordinated. All three studio heads began talking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic and rage. Grace stood perfectly still, watching Lewis B. Meyer's face as he realized that his empire was under attack from 5 different directions simultaneously. This wasn't one actress having a tantrum. This wasn't the negotiating tactic. This was a planned, coordinated rebellion designed to hit all the major studios at the exact same moment during the most important week of the year, opening week of summer film season when millions of dollars in productions were scheduled to begin. Mayer held up his hand for silence, and somehow, even through a telephone speaker, the other studio heads obeyed. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "Grace Kelly is standing in my office right now. She organized this entire thing." There was a beat of absolute silence on the line. Then Jack Warner's voice, low and dangerous. "That little." But before he could finish, Grace stepped forward and spoke directly toward the telephone speaker on Meyer's desk. "I can't hear you, Mr. Warner. And I have a message for all of you." The telephone line went completely silent. Grace could hear the faint static of the long-distance connection, could imagine 3 powerful men in 3 different offices all frozen in shock at the realization that the woman they were discussing could hear every word they were saying. Lewis B. Meyer's face had gone from pale to deep red, a vein pulsing visibly in his temple. He started to reach for the phone, presumably to take it off speaker, but Grace spoke before he could move. "For 30 years, she said, her voice clear and steady, "you have treated actors like property. Like slaves with better costumes and higher wages, but slaves nonetheless. You have controlled our careers, decided who we marry, when we marry, what films we make, what roles we play, what we say in public, where we live, how we dress. You have made billions of dollars while paying us a fraction of what our work generates. You loan us between studios like furniture. You suspend us without pay if we refuse a role. You blacklist us if we complain. That ends today." "Lewis," Mayer said, his voice shaking with rage, "shut her up right now or I will come down there and—" But Grace's voice cut through as like a blade through silk. "I'm not done, Mr. Mayer. And you will listen to every word I have to say because in approximately 3 minutes, you're going to have to make the most important decision of your career." She pulled a chair over to Meyer's desk without being invited to sit and positioned herself directly in front of the telephone speaker. "Here's what's going to happen, gentlemen. You're going to tear up our 7-year contracts. All of them. Grace Kelly, Marlon Brando, Jimmy Stewart, Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn. All gone from your contract rosters effective today. Then you're going to negotiate new terms with each of us individually. Picture-by-picture deals. No more 7-year slavery. We choose our projects. We have approval over directors, scripts, and co-stars. And most importantly, we get a percentage of the profits, not just a flat salary." Daryl Zanuck's voice exploded through the speaker. "This is extortion. This is blackmail. We have legal contracts. We will sue every single one of you into bankruptcy." Grace smiled, and it was the same smile she had used in Rear Window when she revealed the crucial piece of evidence to James Stewart. "No, Mr. Zanuck, this is business. You taught us very well how business works in Hollywood. You taught us that everything is negotiable if you have enough leverage. Well, today we have the leverage. She gestured to the document on Meyer's desk, the one with 47 signatures. By Monday morning, if you choose to fight this, you will have 47 of your biggest stars on strike. Summer film season starts today. How many productions do you have scheduled to begin shooting in the next 2 weeks? Grace paused, letting the question hang in the air. According to Variety, MGM alone has 8 pictures starting production this month. Warner Brothers has 6. Fox has 9. That's 23 productions representing approximately $30 million in committed budgets. How many of those can you complete if half your stars refuse to show up? Jack Warner's voice came through the speaker, quieter now, calculating. You're bluffing. Those actors won't risk their careers for you 5. Grace had been waiting for this exact argument. She pulled another document from her purse, this one a single page. Mr. Warner, I'm going to read you some names. These are actors currently scheduled to begin shooting on your lot this week who have signed letters of solidarity with our movement. Doris Day, scheduled to start Young at Heart on Monday. Lauren Bacall, scheduled for The Cobweb on Tuesday. James Dean, scheduled for Rebel Without a Cause on Thursday. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. James Dean, Grace continued, specifically asked me to tell you that he's tired of being treated like he doesn't matter. He said, and I quote, "Tell Jack Warner that I'd rather flip burgers than spend another day being told I'm replaceable." Grace set the paper down gently. Shall I continue reading names, Mr. Warner, or have I made my point? Louis B. Mayer sat down heavily in his chair. His hands were shaking now, actually shaking, something Grace had never seen before. The man who had intimidated presidents and pushed around billionaires looked suddenly old and fragile. Grace almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then she remembered Judy Garland's exhausted face on set after 16-hour days. She remembered how the studio had refused to let her attend her own sister's funeral because it would interfere with a shooting schedule. She remembered every casual cruelty inflicted in the name of profit and control. A knock on the office door interrupted the tense silence. Meyer's secretary opened it without waiting for permission, her face apologetic but urgent. "Mr. Mayer, I'm very sorry, but there's someone here who insists on seeing you immediately." Before Mayer could respond, a woman walked past the secretary and into the office without invitation. She was 48 years old, wearing tailored slacks and a white blouse, her distinctive cheekbones and sharp eyes instantly recognizable. Katharine Hepburn had arrived. "Kate," Mayer said, his voice a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. "What are you doing here?" Katharine lit a cigarette without asking if smoking was permitted, took a long drag, and exhaled the smoke toward the ceiling. "I'm here to make sure Grace doesn't let you off too easy, Louis." She walked over to the chair next to Grace and sat down, crossing her legs with casual authority. "I've been fighting you bastards for 20 years. Alone. It never worked. I'd win a battle here and there, get a concession or two, but the system always won in the end." She looked at Grace with something close to admiration. "But this girl figured out what I never did. We're stronger together than we ever were apart." She turned her attention to the telephone speaker. "Jack, Daryl, Harry, I know you can hear me. I'm looking at Louis right now, and I can see he understands what's happening. The question is, do you? Because I've been in this industry since 1932, and I have never, not once, seen the studio heads this scared. And you know what?" She smiled, a fierce, triumphant smile. "It's about damn time." Louis B. Mayer looked at Grace Kelly and Katharine Hepburn sitting side by side in front of his desk. He looked at the documents covered in signatures. He looked at the telephone connecting him to 3 other studio heads who were waiting for him to tell them what to do. And for the first time in his entire career, Louis B. Mayer had absolutely no idea how to win. The silence in Louis B. Meyer's office stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but was actually only about 15 seconds. Grace could hear breathing through the telephone speaker, could imagine Jack Warner, Daryl Zanuck, and Harry Cohn all sitting in their respective offices, waiting for Mayer to tell them how to crush this rebellion the way they had crushed every other act of defiance in Hollywood history. But Louis B. Mayer, the man who always had an answer, the man who had built an empire on his ability to outthink and outmaneuver everyone around him, said nothing. Finally, it was Jack Warner who broke the silence. "Lewis, what do we do?" And in those 4 words, Grace heard something she had never expected to hear from one of Hollywood's most powerful men. She heard uncertainty. She heard fear. Meyer's hand moved toward the telephone, hovering over the speaker button as if he wanted to disconnect the call, to have this conversation in private where his weakness wouldn't be on display. But Katharine Hepburn leaned forward and placed her hand over his, stopping him. "No, Lewis. They deserve to hear this. Whatever you're about to say, you say it with all of us listening." Meyer pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. He looked at Katharine with an expression that was equal parts hatred and grudging respect. She had been fighting him longer than any of them, had won more battles against the studios than anyone in Hollywood, and yet the system had always found a way to diminish her victories, to make her pay for her independence. But today, with Grace Kelly's organization and Katharine's experience combined, something had shifted. The balance of power that had remained constant for 3 decades was tilting. "What choice do we have?" Meyer said quietly, and Grace realized he wasn't asking a question. He was stating a fact. The studio head, who had never admitted defeat in his life, was admitting it now. Harry Cohn's voice came through the speaker, desperate and angry. "We have legal contracts. We have teams of lawyers. We can fight this in court for years." Grace shook her head even though Cohn couldn't see her. "Mr. Cohn, you can absolutely fight this in court. You can spend years in litigation while your stars refuse to work and your productions sit idle. You can watch other studios who choose to negotiate gain access to the biggest names in Hollywood while you're left with contract players nobody wants to see. Or you can accept that the world changed today." Daryl Zanuck's voice was more measured, more calculating. "What exactly are your terms, Miss Kelly?" Grace pulled out a typed document that had been prepared by Jimmy Stewart's lawyer, a man named Lou Wasserman who represented some of the biggest stars in Hollywood and who had been quietly working on this plan for months. She began reading. "No more 7-year exclusive contracts. All future deals will be picture by picture, negotiated individually. Actors will receive a percentage of net profits in addition to their salaries, starting at 10% and negotiable upward based on star power. Actors will have meaningful consultation on script approval, director approval, and casting of co-stars. The studios retain final decision-making authority, but must consider actor input in good faith." She paused, looking at Meyer's face, which had gone from red to gray. "No more suspension clauses for refusing roles. If an actor declines a project, the studio can offer alternatives, but cannot suspend without pay as punishment. No more loaning of actors between studios without the actor's explicit written consent. And finally, all blacklist practices end immediately. No studio will be permitted to prevent an actor from working at another studio as retaliation for contract disputes." Jack Warner's laugh was bitter and harsh. "You're asking us to give up everything. Every tool we have to maintain order and discipline." Grace stood up, and her voice took on an edge that surprised even her. "No, Mr. Warner. We're asking you to treat us like human beings instead of assets. We're asking you to share the profits we generate. We're asking for the basic dignity of having a say in our own careers. If that seems like everything to you, then maybe you never deserved to have it in the first place." Katharine Hepburn stubbed out her cigarette in the ashtray on Meyer's desk and stood as well. "Gentlemen, I'm 68 years old. Well, 48, but who's counting? I've made you millions of dollars. I've won 4 Academy Awards. I've brought prestige and respectability to every studio I've worked for. And I'm telling you right now that if you don't accept these terms, I will personally spend the next 5 years of my life making sure every young actor coming into this industry knows exactly how you treated us. I will make it my mission to burn this system to the ground." There was a long pause. Then Daryl Zanuck's voice came through, defeated and exhausted. "When can we meet to negotiate the details?" Grace felt her heart leap, but kept her expression neutral. "Monday morning, 10 o'clock, the Beverly Hills Hotel. Bring your lawyers. We'll bring ours. And Mr. Zanuck? Come prepared to sign. We're not interested in lengthy negotiations. These terms are not a starting point. They're the deal." One by one, the studio heads agreed. Jack Warner, grudgingly. Harry Cohn, with barely suppressed rage. And finally, Lewis B. Meyer, who simply said, "I'll be there," before disconnecting the call without another word. The office fell silent. Grace and Katharine stood looking at Mayer, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 30 minutes. He picked up the resignation letter Grace had placed on his desk at the beginning of this meeting, the letter that had started everything, and slowly tore it in half. "You don't need to resign, Grace," he said quietly. "After Monday, you won't have a contract to resign from anyway." He looked at her with eyes that held no more fight, no more threats, just a kind of hollow acceptance. "You destroyed everything I built." Grace shook her head. "No, Louis. You destroyed it yourself. You just did it so slowly, you didn't notice it was crumbling until today. We didn't tear down your empire. We just stopped holding it up." By 2 o'clock that afternoon, news had spread through Hollywood like wildfire. By 6 o'clock, reporters were camped outside Grace Kelly's apartment, outside Jimmy Stewart's house, outside the gates of every major studio. By the next morning, Variety's headline read, "The Rebellion. 5 stars quit on same day." By the end of the week, 3 more major stars had announced they were refusing to sign new 7-year contracts. The dam had broken. The meeting on Monday, June 6th, lasted 4 hours. By the time it ended, all 5 stars had new deals. Picture-by-picture contracts with profit participation. Grace Kelly was released from MGM entirely and free to marry Prince Rainier of Monaco the following spring. Marlon Brando signed a landmark deal with Warner Brothers for Sayonara that included $1 million plus 10% of profits, the first time an actor had ever received such terms. Jimmy Stewart negotiated a similar arrangement for his next Hitchcock film. Bette Davis gained unprecedented creative control. Katharine Hepburn formed her own production company. Within 2 years, the 7-year contract system had collapsed completely. By 1960, the studio system as it had existed since the 1920s was dead. Louis B. Mayer, already forced into semi-retirement, would die in 1957, his empire dismantled. Jack Warner would lose control of Warner Brothers by 1967. The age of the studio moguls was over. The age of talent power had begun. And it all started on June 3, 1955, when 5 people walked into 5 different offices and said the one word that changed everything. "No."